welcome to Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, your host, and we are back to have another conversation with a change maker working to accelerate the transition to a sustainable, carbon-neutral society. The plastic industry desperately needs to step up its recycling game. Less than 6% of the approximately 370 million tons of plastic produced each year is recycled. Recycling is all about economics, and making it profitable depends on gaining reliable access to supplies of recyclable materials, as well as customers who are ready to buy the processed plastic once it's been recycled. And nowhere is that more difficult than in plastics recycling. Our guest today is Christian Schiller, co-founder of Cirplus. That's Cirplus with a C, C-I-R-P-L-U-S, for those of you listening, a digital marketplace for circular plastic. Think of it as Match.com or Tinder for European plastics recyclers, and ultimately it'll be extended to the United States. That includes companies that collect post-consumer materials, all the stuff that we try to recycle, and those that sell processed recycled plastic for use in new products. Cirplus connects sellers with buyers and collects fees for speeding the transaction along. Sellers save on marketing costs and can establish ongoing relationships that support their business growth with just a few clicks. Christian previously helped to build BlaBlaCar, which is one of the largest car-sharing services in the world. He was the first employee at the transportation marketplace. Digital technology, as we often hear from our guests, creates efficiencies that make previously difficult markets come to life. So let's dive into Cirplus and see how the recycling industry can be reimagined around predictable flows of materials within countries and across borders. You can learn more about Cirplus at cirplus.com. That, again, is C-I-R-P-L-U-S, cirplus.com. Welcome to the show, Christian. How are you today?
Hi, Mitch. I'm great. It's quite warm here in Hamburg, Germany, but I'm doing great.
Well, let's hope it's not another summer of record heat. I wanted to start off and ask, because plastics recycling has been a very challenging market to be in, but one that is suddenly very much in demand. What motivated you a couple of years ago to launch Cirplus, and what made you think that the plastics recycling market was ripe for reinvention?
That's a great question, Mitch. Prior to his launching Cirplus about 3.5 years ago, I had been the first employee at a platform called BlaBlaCar. Mm-hmm. That's a French unicorn these days, the largest ride-sharing platform in the world, right? This is kind of where I learned the ropes, how to build platforms. And I was the first employee in Germany, scaling from 0 members to 6 million, 0 employees to 15. So what was supposed to be a freelancing gig for 6 months turned into 4.5 years of like this crazy unicorn story of scaling really from 0 to, well, actually then when I left, we were 550 employees. Mm-hmm. So after 4.5 years, and my vesting was kind of through, I said, all right, I don't really want to Paris, which would have been the next step for me. So I quit my job and I fulfilled a lifelong dream of mine, which is traveling the world on my own. So I packed my backpack and traveled the world for a year. And it was there on month 6 when I was mostly in South America, mm-hmm. and then doing a typical tourist trip from Cartagena, Colombia to Panama. It's like a classical sailing trip, 6 days, Caribbean waters, paradise. So I thought. And what then happened was I actually had my legs at the rear end of the boat, second day on the open sea. And we were then traversing, actually entering a massive carpet of algae and plastic waste. The algae was kind of forming a net where plastic waste was captured, and a little biofilm had been on it. So something touched my leg. I got up and you saw it. For the first time in my life, I saw what the plastic pandemic really means. And that's really what it is. It's a pandemic, I think, these days, that an uncontrolled influx of plastic into the environment. And sure, Mitch, I had heard before about plastic as a problem, but never had I been exposed as a German to the real problem of where it ends up, when it ends up in the ocean. And that was the moment I wrote in my travel blog, hey, I got 6 months left, and I'm also an avid surfer, you should know. So it's a topic close to my heart. But I wrote in my blog, hey, do you know NGOs, companies, anybody who's dealing with a plastic waste issue? Mm-hmm. Because I didn't have a job when I came back 6 months later, and then I was looking to how can I dedicate my skills to a problem I really care about. So to your question, that's really what got me into thinking about this space and thinking it's such an underused resource, a plastic, after single use ending up in the ocean. Can we not make more out of it and better? And can we not found a profitable business around it? Little did I know of the complexity of the plastic recycling markets back then, for the better probably. But I really then entered with the idea saying, all right, the transactional costs are so high, virgin plastic is generally cheaper, which makes this market struggle forever, really.
Right.
Can digitization help bring down these transactional costs, somewhat help on the way of leveling the playing field? And that's what Cirplus is, to come to an end here. It's trying to connect these fragmented, intransparent markets of plastic waste and plastic recycling back with the producing companies and conversion and the brands to lower the cost and establish reliable supply chains around quality recycled plastics.
And you describe it as a marketplace for circular plastic. And having been to a lot of plastics recycling and other recycling industry events, I know that most of those relationships start over drinks or on the show floor. They have a conversation, and then they just sort of ship plastic for the longest time they possibly can before they have to renegotiate. And in 2018, when China stopped taking all of our plastic because it was contaminated, the market fell apart. Why now do we see so much increased demand for recycled plastic? I know it's consumer driven, but do you see a real change in the marketplace? And how is Cirplus working to really accelerate that transition?
Yeah, and I think it's fascinating that you mentioned the Chinese import ban. I think that sets in motion what I would call right now a perfect storm. There's like so many aspects that now like make this market grow faster and faster and make the demand grow much stronger than the supply. But actually started with what you mentioned, China closing its borders. So all of a sudden, plastic waste needing to find new and equally cheap outlets, right? But at the same time, also the European Union started really for real around the European plastic strategy, trying to think, we are a resource poor continent, unlike the United States. And we have all these hydrocarbons in the form of plastic in our countries already. Why do we not make more of it? And putting like this lip service that you usually hear in the circular economy before, like we should turn waste into resources, but now taking the first real steps to put a regulation into place, even before I would say the consumer bubble came and the consumer pressure, to set steps into motion. And unknown to many as well, the German Packaging Act then entered into force 1st of January 2019, and that was exactly 1 month after we had founded Cirplus. Us being a German company, we're obviously close to the German market. And that was in Europe, the first regulation that actually tied a certain bonus or punishment fee to the use of recycled plastics, or rather non-use of recycled plastics in packaging. Yeah, so kind of trying to really level the playing field now for real and say, all right, if you Procter & Gamble and you Henkel continue just business as usual, we're just going to make it more expensive for you to just use virgin plastic. Now, fast forward another 3 years, and Germany has been overtaken by countries like the UK, and even there's movement in the United States that try to do exactly the same to add costs to the use of just virgin plastic, and so strengthen this demand push towards putting recyclates into products. And then you add Greta Thunberg and yes, the sustainability push. And now we talk about the Ukraine crisis and scarcity of resources. So that's what I mean, Mitch, with this perfect storm right now that has low access to virgin resources, high demand from big brands driven both by consumer pressure and regulatory pressure. And that sort of leads to this incredible growth in the recycling markets, I think a growth that the market has not seen in it probably ever.
No, as far as I'm aware, this is new. Now, I've been on the site. I've spent some time. Tell us how it works. I've got some unrecycled collected plastic. What happens? What's the first step?
Yeah. So yeah, if let's say you're a waste owner, you have collected plastic waste, could be even unsorted or could be baled already if it's from a consumer stream or a MRF coming. You can specify the plastic waste, put it on the platform so recyclers can come on the platform and get in touch basically and start sourcing plastic waste feedstock. And at the same time, putting everything from regrind all the way to then regranulates and compounds on the platform for sale as well. So for recycler, they're really in the middle, kind of as a three-sided marketplace. They can buy and sell. And the buyers on the very end are then the plastic converters or the brands that need granule material to say, look, I need 1,000 tons HDPE shampoo bottle grade because I need to put this now into my shampoo bottles. And we see lots of interesting interactions with brands that have never, ever prior to that use recycled plastics.
Yeah.
Coming on the platform and learning to know the ropes of how challenging it also is to put recycled plastics into their products.
So what did you learn from BlaBlaCar? Because deciding to share a vehicle has a lot of similarities to deciding to do business together. What tricks and hacks did you have to focus on in order to get the plastics recyclers to start to use the marketplace?
Yeah. And actually, great that you pointed out that often because actually often we get in the market, the first response, well, ride sharing has nothing to do with buying and selling recycled plastic, but I tend to disagree, just like you said, because I said, in the end, it's about establishing trust between two parties that might know each other already or not, about a product, which is a ride share or let's say a material. And can that platform facilitate that such trust that you will go via such a platform and not try to just use your phone books or the trade fairs or like you discussed it and try to make a deal over a beer. And so a lot of the hacks that I learned at BlaBlaCar with regard how do you establish trust is now what I'm adapting to put on Cirplus as well, like working with standards, working with certified bodies, trying to get like reviews and ratings into the platform, showing also the immediate added value when you don't just talk to your 10 existing suppliers, but actually, hey, I can compare, maybe I want to wait this year a little bit, maybe I want to try a new supplier or a new buyer. And these are the aspects that, while needing to be adapted to the B2B world, is still very much where I can really nourish from my BlaBlaCar experience and say, you know what, that worked great at BlaBlaCar. Now I'm going to transfer it in the world of recycled plastics. And believe it or not, in 2 out of 3 cases, it works.
I completely agree. I happen to have been involved in the founding of Match.com, and some of the basic steps involved creating trust, or at least creating flows of information that allowed the people in the marketplace to establish trust. Now, contamination is the biggest issue in plastics recycling. How does Cirplus allow somebody to express that we really do a good job of providing uncontaminated recyclables?
Yeah. I mean, if you go on the platform today, you will see, I mean, there's first a big separation whether or not you put waste on the platform, feedstock or recyclables, as we call it, or recyclates already. I mean, that's number one. Number two, when you specify your products, we call this nudging. So we, of course, want to incentivize the users to give us and share as much information as they can about the quality of their product. Now, there's a bit of a tension here, Mitch, because, you know, in digital business, the longer you and the more you ask of a user, the higher is the drop-off rate, right? They say, it's too long, I'm not going to give the information. But we continue now with like little product hacks to educate the users about, hey, the better you specify your recyclables, the better you give us information about how clean or dirty your recyclables are, the better chances you have that you actually find a matching buyer immediately or like in a shorter amount of time. So that's step number one. It's just the amount of data that we require and thus incentivizing the user to give us more data. Second step though is we have been quite fundamental in building what I would call the first industrial standard for high quality plastic recycling outside PET. And that's the DIN Spec 91446. So we've built this together with 16 players from the value chain, including Tomra, including Kraus Maffei, machine builders, recyclers, etc., to define the data quality levels required of feedstock and recyclates to put converters into a situation to really decide, all right, what do I have here? Is this a really highly contaminated plastic waste? Can I work with that for my application or can I not? So this again we had to do the heavy lifting at the beginning because there was no such standard, Mitch. There was nothing in the market and the existing standards were largely unusable or were not used because they didn't give enough information back that could be used for a converter or a brand to say, okay, I'm going to use this recycled, or even further down the line, I'm going to use this recyclable from a recycling process. So long story short, data input required, as well as building the standard and now plugging this in with the certification bodies together to increase the trust in material on the platform.
Now, standards are both national and international. You're working in Europe right now. How do you anticipate expanding into other regions, particularly in the United States, because we are interested in that, but also communicating that those standards or that there are gaps in standards that we need to fill that you're ready to help solve those problems? How are you going to grow based on all of those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, definitely a challenging task. I mean, for one, I'm quite, with regard to the American market, I think I'm quite lucky to have a great investor from the United States on board already, my climate journey. So, you know, once we're ready to go across the pond and really establish a physical presence in the United States, I think I know whom to call. That's the first thing that I want to say. But as you asked more specifically about the dissemination of this standards and standardization efforts, today already on Cirplus, we have companies from more than 100 countries using Cirplus. You know? And unbeknown to most of them, let's say I had a Mexican recycler on the platform just the other day. Once you start putting products on the platform, you automatically specify your material based on the standard that we ingrain in the platform. They
So
might not know what the standard is.
It propagates itself simply
Exactly.
through use.
Exactly. And it's almost like they ask, what does this DQL2, data quality level 2 mean based on DIN spec 914? Because it's an English standard, like we wrote it in English. So that's something that there's a first like learn how to use the standard because there's no other available, which is great for us. And believe me, we're speaking with UL, with TÜV, with the great certification organizations as well, because they're interested in their work too, because of this, for them, it's a business then to certify against such a standard, right? Still, right now, it's only a German standard while being used international. My next step is to promulgate or disseminate the standard is, I'm active at the European organization, CEN, the organization that spreads the European standards. And we're now turning the DIN spec into a European standard, which is very much part of the roadmap of the European Commission, as they are requesting more standards for the recycled plastics markets. And so this standard basically is at the forefront of being turned into the next European standard, I might say. So then at least we have this established as a European standard. And who knows, hopefully the American community will also find the standard relevant enough to say, you know what, we don't need to reinvent the wheel here. We can already use their standard because it sets the same, you know, plastic recycling is essentially the same in the US than in Europe.
So how fast is your business growing?
Right now, we cannot actually serve all the demand on the platform. Since the beginning of the year, demand on the platform for recyclables and recyclers has grown more than 600% since January. Yeah. Now, of course, this is percentage and we're still a small business, but still, like for us, it's actually a bit of a challenge, Mitch, because recyclers on the inventory side, we have about 1.3 million tons of material listed right now as we speak.
Right.
But 90% of that is sold out. And that tells you something. That tells you something. And for us as a platform, it's a challenge, right? To acquire more supply, of course, is one big thing. And also manage the user expectations because you have a lot of demand in this. But, you know, we also not magicians. If the material is not available, then, you know, what do? You know, we kind of cater to the disappointment in a way to say, you know what? Just register your procurement needs. And the moment the material hits the world again, you'll be the first to know because on Cirplus, we're collecting it all because the market will change again too. You know, I think we both foresee a supply shortage for quite some time now, but you know, who knows what's going to happen in a year's time? Nobody foresaw the Ukraine war really. So long story short, it's right now really challenging for us that we cannot actually keep up with the demand for recycled plastics overall platform.
This is a great story. I want to take a quick break for a commercial. We have to pay for our show. We'll be right back. We're back to continue the conversation with Christian Schiller, co-founder of Cirplus, a new marketplace for buying and selling recyclable and recycled plastic. So, Christian, this is really encouraging to hear about all of the growth and activity that you're describing. Are you seeing new companies, new entrants in this market, particularly in sourcing recyclable plastic?
Absolutely, and I think you've had some of them on your show already. I think I've seen Victor Deovo from Recycleye, but I think especially in the UK, I think there's at least 3 venture-backed startups now in the space of improving the sorting. I think I'm speaking of Grey Parrot, Recycleye, and there's a third one as well.
Compology is another one.
Yeah, there is. It's me as a venture-backed startup being close to the venture capital world. There's a lot of excitement around this entire technology and sorting, number one. Mm-hmm. Second, there is an area of attention for venture capital to go into the global south, into the markets of the global south, to really put money into better waste collecting infrastructure. We're not even talking about sorting here. There's a company in India, for example, Recycle, they're called. They raised about, I believe, a $20 million US round fairly not long ago. and they're only in the space of collecting and improving the waste collection for markets that don't have a proper waste collection. So you see a lot of activity at the beginning of the chain, I would say, right? Then there's also in the second space, because recycling depends fundamentally on the quality of the products you put on the market, right? Are they really recyclable? And you know that more than anybody else. But I think I see a lot of startups in the space of, can we redesign, or can we help brands redesign their products so that they use more mono materials or more easy to recycle materials? I mean, there is some tension in these trends about replacing plastic now with other materials, etc. That's a whole podcast for itself there. But
that's such an entire year's podcast right there.
Right. But there's also venture money going into that space, right? Redesigning products to make them fit and ready for recycling, right? And then the third is, of course, I'd say in the digitization of the recycling process. Not so much for venture capital, but when you talk to the machine builders, the ones that are really putting the machines for recycling, the Stahlingers, Eremas, Kraus Maffeis, Arbuchs, it's very interesting to see how they optimize inline extrusion, or like where they develop software to help the extrusion process or the recycling process to work with more impurities and more fluctuations in melt flow index, etc. And that's the fundamentally missing gap to improve the extrusion process again, that the recycled plastic can reach quality levels never seen before, so that they are ready to go into applications where they have never really been used before, and thus unlock new markets for the waste to go into. So these are the three areas I would say where we see most activity.
Let's look at one example, and that's recycled PET. There's a lot of demand for this, particularly from the bottling industry. Are you seeing a significant increase in the volume of collected PET that could be processed into rPET or recycled PET? Is that being driven by investment in the kinds of companies you were just talking about, or are consumers simply flooding the market with more and more recyclables as a result of their efforts to clean up their own mess?
I'd say my immediate response is neither of the two, Mitch, actually.
Really?
Because, at least now I'm speaking mostly of the European market. Not sure how that is really in America, but at least when I speak for the German and Austrian markets here, like, the big markets in the center of Europe, the legislation changed to also put more deposit return schemes on PET that's outside the sodas. We like, just a very minor detail example. In Germany, the juices PET have not been under the deposit return scheme. Now they are. So almost overnight, you took it out of the classic household curbside collection yellow bag system in Germany into the clean streams of the deposit return schemes under the control of the retailers, right? So there's more quantity that have been, by regulatory shifts, be qualified for the market.
Well, does that suggest that we need to think outside the single stream recycling system and be more specialized, which is also an element of what I was trying to ask earlier, because consumers are looking for ways to do this better. Certainly the people listening to the show are, and want to know that their efforts are going to pay off, not just in terms of getting a deposit back, but that the process works.
Yeah. But look, Mitch, here, I have a very strong opinion in that regard, because I always think, and Germany, you're being the separation European champion there, why do we burden consumers with this difficult decision to decide, all right, this yogurt cup has 3 elements, I need to take care of the aluminum cap and then the paper. I mean, it's never there's never going to be perfect sorting at the household level. But then you talk to the Tomras and Zesotex and Steiners of the world, and they tell you, we can sort a lot better already today. It can almost even work if we just decide we have a wet waste stream and a dry waste stream. So to completely make it idiot proof for the consumer.
But still a segmentation that people need to be aware of and understand how to do.
True. That's true too. But I mean, I think Germany with the segmentation is going too far, honestly. It makes it so complex for consumers, and it doesn't keep up with the innovations in the packaging space specifically. I mean, now we go really into the packaging space, but I think, are we really asking of consumers to always scan a yogurt cup and understand this is now biodegradable plastic, this has to go into your bio-based bin, and this is bioplastic but goes into your yellow bin, or this is non-recyclable, goes into your gray bin? I see the data, and I see how poorly we separate correctly in Germany. And that's a very advanced collection system. So my answer actually is, well, why don't we let technology solve that at the aggregate level? Because we could, if we wanted to. At least that's my opinion. I know there's a lot of counter interest in that market, but I don't see that we can get the consumer as to be that perfectly sorting human being that we all hope to be.
And despite the fact we have a database to help them figure that stuff out across a wide range of materials, I agree. I think what we need to do is radically simplify the packaging regime that we live under in order to, particularly with plastic, create a more consistent streams. Let me ask about a couple other technologies that we've been talking about on the show. What is your take on the emerging chemical or molecular plastic recycling business? Is there a there? And what do you see as the critical points we should be watching for to say, yes, that really is beginning to work?
That's a fascinating discussion to have. Now, what I see is still, number one, what I see is the commitment by the big petrochemicals to pour a lot of money into it, right? I think the commitment, Europe is by 2030, 7.6 billion euros. Plastics Europe had made this announcement. So it's going to be reality at some point. Yeah, they don't come out with such a statement and then don't go through, number one. Number two, I still don't see any scaling going on with the products the projects that I see. I see a lot of testing and still understanding which feedstock really qualifies for what type of chemical recycling process, right? Because there are so many out there that you can fit under the chemical recycling umbrella. It's not clear cut where are they putting their chips on. So that's point number two. Point number three, I think for MRFs, that is a real, MRFs, sorting plants, that's a real interesting market situation to be in, because if only they understood better to which specifications of plastic waste they have to now maybe rearrange their sorting equipment to have a new outlet for their baled material, that becomes just a new and additional stream of revenue for them. So I think they are in a really comfortable position because they can sit back almost in a way and say, you know what, let's see where the petrochemicals are coming up with. And then I just need to be ready to kind of steer my volumes that go through my plant into 60% goes mechanical, the other 40% can go into chemical, and I might even get a premium on the chemical recycled feedstock. Yeah.
Right.
So this is just general view on it. I think the fourth big thing is what I don't yet see play out is that regulators are so willingly accepting it on an equal footing as mechanical recycling, at least in Europe, even though there's a lot of effort going into it or from the lobbying side. That's of course a crucial step to happen for the chemical recycling, because if you don't, then the economics of chemical recycling will always be so poor, you might as well go after virgin, right?
And we have to understand whether or not they can really be a carbon neutral, non-toxic process. And that hasn't been
proven at all. And in Europe, I can say the debate is only about the CO2 impact, but what you're touching upon, Mitch, is really to the point. What about all the untoxic parts of the chemical recycling process? We don't really talk about that, right? And you'll end up with a process that, you get the carbon back somehow, but at such a high cost that you might as well say, you know what, better to incinerate that waste than to chemically recycle it.
And this is all about economics at the end of the day. One of the other questions that I've asked a number of people is all the plastic that is in the ground and lying around the planet already recyclable? Is there a way for us to create an incentive around collecting what we have already buried to start to replace the plastic, particularly the virgin petroleum that we use to make all the plastic we use?
Okay, may I now venture a little bit into the field of visionary and maybe less realistic?
Be sci-fi. Go for it.
And not so much sci-fi, maybe, because I listened to this amazing podcast, what was it, 2 years ago, and I was already building a Cirplus called 30 Minutes to the Moon by the BBC. It's a fascinating podcast about the landing on the moon, right? Mm-hmm. And I tried to put myself into the shoes of the United States, beginning of the space flight program, and saying, in 10 years, we're going to put a man on the moon, yeah? And Kennedy was well aware that the technology wasn't there. And probably most engineers at the time said, that's impossible. We can't do it. And unsurprisingly, Mitch, it was fascinating. I learned this through the podcast. The average age of the NASA engineer that worked on the project, did you know that? It was 29 years old. They came right out of college because probably older engineers said, no, I'm not going to work on that space flight thing. That's never going to work. Yeah.
Which is why lifelong education is going to be critical for all of us to make these changes. Part of the problem is that older engineers and older everybody stopped learning. But,
absolutely,
but the space program was also the most effective marketing program in history, as far as I can tell.
I mean, here I am. I'm a German and talking about how great the American space program was, right? But I like the metaphor because, and I actually ingrained it into the culture of Cirplus. I can tell you, Gene Kranz, the flight commander of the NASA program, you know, he said my engineers had 2 words written on the whiteboard: tough and competent. And if there's anything you need to survive in the markets of recycling and plastic waste, you need to be tough and competent. And that's what we're trying to replicate at Cirplus. It really, I onboard my team with these words. Yeah, I say this is a tough market to be in. To your question, though, I think what I take from that is I just simply don't accept that the human ingenuity, the engineering power of all the great engineers out there, just sort of give up in the face of, yeah, but this is multi-layered material. It's impossible to recycle. We can't do anything about it. I just refuse to accept that. Honestly, if all the oil wells in the world tomorrow would stop working and all the refineries had to shut down, I promise you we would find a way to make these products that are seen as unrecyclables today in some way or another recyclable. Yeah. So
you don't see degraded monomers in that vast amount of waste. You see the potential to restore those monomers and use them.
I do see the challenges as well. If I may give you one example, I'm not just visionary. I know, I mean, and this was a project from big FMCGs from the United States, you probably know, and they've built a bottle called the Beach Bottle. Yep. And they really tried to collect plastic waste, real ocean plastic, not beach plastic. This was real ocean. And I was in the halls where of the converter who took the plastic waste, and had to say it was such a, excuse me, nightmare. I would have used another word, but it's such a nightmare because different levels of degradation. Yes, it was all HDPE, but it was different levels of degradation. There was biofilm on it. It was smelly, and we had to reuse odor additives to get rid of the odor. Nobody wants to have a shampoo bottle that smells like fish, right? And so I'm well aware of the fact, Mitch, that there's a lot of technology not available today. Many will say it's impossible to get anything useful out of these polymers that have been in the environment already. But I'm not so quick to just accept that. I say, yes, it's going to be super challenging. Maybe we just have to find a cleaner way to burn them. Mm-hmm. Could also be a good use of the polymers. But I'm just not accepting that these landfills where we have all the plastic buried in the ground, as you said, that it's forever lost for human usage. I just don't accept it. And I think necessity would drive the required technology advances. And all that I'm seeing in terms of consumer and regulatory pressure makes me hopeful that we're eventually going to get there.
Last question on the process side, and that is, do you see the consumer packaged goods companies who are now buying all of the recycled plastic really starting to embrace and think about the idea of circularity, particularly with regard to standardizing their packaging so that it is more easily recycled?
It's such a broad question. I think the classical answer is it depends. Yeah.
Do you see the early indications that the leaders are going that direction?
Yes, I see indications, number one. Mm-hmm. I see, number two, though, a second contrary impact as well. And that has to do, again, with what we already mentioned in the podcast, chemical recycling. Mm-hmm. If I hear as a brand that my LDPE packaging will have an outlet in the chemical recycling process, why should I worry about updating my product design if the big petrochems tell me, you know what, don't worry about it. In 5 years from now, it's going to be considered recyclable because it will be entering the chemical recycling stream.
I see what you mean, yeah.
So there's a certain chilling effect on these, let's say, so you call early signs that some in the product design are now questioning, should we really spend so much time on redesigning and really putting recyclates into our product when we can just kind of do business as usual with and then putting the chips on the petrochems that they're gonna, in German we say, get the coals out of the fire. Yeah, so this is something, my answer to your question is yes and no. I see good early signs, but I also see chilling effects, given that there's still so much uncertainty where the market for plastic recycling is going to be in 10 years from now.
So based on what you've learned from Cirplus today, are there other material streams that you are thinking would be attractive to bring into your marketplace over time? Or is plastic enough for now?
Absolutely enough for now, Mitch. Funny enough, we started out, the original tagline of the company was the global marketplace for recycled materials, right?
Okay.
But quickly we learned, and quickly, little did I know about the plastic markets at the time, quickly I learned the markets for plastic is so huge. The problems are also so big. And we're only talking about plastic recycling today and really the standard plastics mostly, right? Post-consumer, we talk about the polyolefins, the PETs, but we haven't even started really touching upon post-consumer technical plastics, right? There you only have post-industrial recycling really, but what about getting those home appliance plastic PP, ABS out of the washing machine in the fridge and putting that back? Or what about old car parts, used cars, not post-industrial recycling? We are at the beginning of that debate, which nobody has really that under their purview. The other day, final, hopefully interesting aspect for your listeners, here in Hamburg, we also have an aviation hub because Airbus is producing parts of their fleet here. Mm-hmm. And flight, they're starting to think about recycling of their, the plastic there is in airplanes. Yeah. And can we get recycled plastics into airplanes? It's not really known to the public, and challenges are huge, obviously. But I say, Mitch, there's enough work for me for a lifetime to spend on making surplus work just for the plastic space.
I think it's a good idea not to boil the ocean. I completely understand where you're going, and I'm glad to hear it. And this is really encouraging, I got to tell you. Do you see an end potentially to the demand for virgin petroleum as a result of the recycling of plastic?
Yes. I mean, actually, in my, I can say in my presentations to investors, when I'm asked exactly that question, I say, the future will be bio-based plastics, right? Plus high quality recycling, plus a much more limited and smaller market for biodegradable plastics, where the biodegradability is really by design. You need this plastic to disintegrate because it's in the human body, like stitches or something. I don't know. This is the niche market. I'd say. To your questions, I do see an end to the need for fossil-based virgin plastic. So we will switch to bio-based feedstock, but at a molecular level, it will be the same plastic, highly durable, easy to recycle, ideally with additives that don't mess up the recycling process so much. Yeah. This is what I would say is the future of what I see is the future of the plastic. We're not going to get rid of the material, but we're going to move away from crude oil as the feedstock, and we're going to improve plastic recycling. We have to across all polymer types and move into real, even recycling methods we don't even know of yet, Mitch, bioenzymatic, catalytic recycling. There's so much out there. I think we're just at the beginning of a huge wave.
And a lot of engineers coming out of college to solve those problems, which is also encouraging. I hope you'll come back and talk with us some more about this, but how can our listeners follow along with what Cirplus is doing?
Well, there's the usual channels. Of course, we are active on social media. Hit us up on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, you name your channel. And of course, if you are active in the space of buying and selling feedstock and recyclers, just sign up on cirplus.com today. It's still for free now, as we're just iterating on our business model, but it won't be free forever. So you better sign up now and start trading.
Well, folks, you heard it here first. Get signed up and save a little money. Christian, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thank you, Mitch. My pleasure.
We've been speaking with Christian Schiller. He's the co-founder of Cirplus, a digital marketplace for circular plastics, and you can find out more at cirplus.com. That's CIRPLUS.com. That was a very inspiring conversation for me because it shows that we can use technology to solve these problems, but it doesn't always require a focus on technology. It means that we have to pay attention to human issues. How do you build trust? How do you do that? You have open marketplaces where information is available to everyone and they can make informed decisions. But that's also an environment in which new business models and new opportunities can evolve. And there are clearly huge opportunities for startups and for those firms who want to recalibrate their business a bit to source reliably clean, uncontaminated material and sell it into these marketplaces for plastics, metals, and other materials that we are still struggling to figure out how to recycle. So think about all of your human interactions and what you can do to encourage your neighbors to recycle more, to encourage your customers to send materials back to you in some way, or at least through some sort of a reverse logistics system that allows those materials to be aggregated and recycled. It's just the beginning of what we need to do. And the sustainable economy is going to evolve out of people taking the time and taking the risks to change the world. So let's do it together. This is Earth911 Sustainability in Your Ear. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, and we're going to be back with another innovator interview soon. In the meantime, take a few minutes and share this podcast. Let's get Christian's ideas out there so everybody can hear them. Your friends, your family, the people you work with, the world is waiting for new information. More ideas is going to result in less waste. We'll be back. In the meantime, take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.